It's very important to small business owners, especially where you don't have kind of much to lean on. It's important to understand that if you're solving a real problem, if you're selling a real product or a service that people need, and it's digital and it's online, so people will in most cases will still need it. I'm seeing that with companies that we invested in. The world of solutions is divided into three different groups.
Mm-hmm.
But you could be in antibiotics, you could be a painkiller, or you could be a vitamin.
Welcome to the EcomXFactor podcast, where it's all about launching and scaling your business using sales funnels, automations, and smart marketing. And now, please welcome your host, the founder of EcomXFactor, Yaron.
Hi, Eran. How are you?
Hi, good morning, Yaron. Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon. I'm very excited. We already discussed for about 25 minutes, and it was very inspirational, thought-provoking, and interesting. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. Likewise.
Awesome. So for people who don't know you, you're currently a founder and CEO of Menara. Can you please elaborate about what you're doing these days and maybe even share your background story?
Sure. So today I'm the CEO of Menara Ventures. We're a publicly traded VC, traded in the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. We're investing in early stage digital transformation startups. A little bit about my background. If we go many years ago, I got my first computer at the age of 10. It was many years ago. And I kind of taught myself programming. And then, fast forward in my 20s, I went to law school. And in parallel, I got a job at a startup that was then acquired by SAP.
Mm-hmm.
And so I joined SAP and spent there 6 years at different positions in engineering and R&D and product management. And then I left SAP after 6 years and started my entrepreneurial career. I founded 3 startups, 2 of which were acquired. It was in the space of SaaS, online, B2B, to C, verticals, different startups. And then 2016, I joined a company called Intango. It's a technology-driven company in the space of digital marketing, advertising technology. I led their investment activity structured as a corporate VC. It was called Intango Ventures. We did outstanding results with that fund. And then at the end of 2020, I left Intango and started Menara Ventures together with the co-founder and CEO of Intango I worked with at previous years. And we also partnered with another private equity firm called the Barenboim Group. So altogether, we founded Menara Ventures and went public in the summer of 2021.
Awesome. Great. That's a very rich resume. Can you share about what you are investing these days, or what are the companies you invested lately? Just to give the listeners an idea, a ballpark.
Sure. We're investing in early stage digital transformation startups. Early stage is mostly seed and round A. And digital transformation is kind of a nice term that collects a set of many, many verticals. I'd say our core expertise is around online, digital, e-commerce, retail technology. So we did invest in marketing technology, customer experience, insurtech, fintech. So in essence, everything that, every technology that has been here before, it's proven technology. And with the new kind of set of technology like AI, machine learning, big data, and all that, it kind of transforms either the technology itself or the businesses that use this technology to like a new generation technology and benefits for the businesses. So this is what we invest.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. While you were talking, I was obviously listening, but I was also thinking about what should be the next question. And before we hopped on the call, I asked you, is there anything specific that you would like to discuss? And you mentioned that you would like to keep the conversation optimistic. Obviously, it's a kind of a heavy topic, but it's very positive. So I thought that I might explicitly ask you, why is it important? Why optimism is important in your opinion, and why you wanted to make it a point that this podcast would be optimistic?
I consider myself a founder of companies, and I think that you cannot be a founder if you're not optimistic. So you need to be super, super optimistic, but you also need to be realistic. So in essence, I think it's important to be optimistic in order to allow yourself to dare and build something, even though there might be people around that would tell you that it will not work, or, this, you shouldn't do that. You should go in that path, you should go in a different direction, and so on. And I think that especially in nowadays, we see a recession and the high interest rates globally and unemployment, especially in our space, like in the high tech, but also in other spaces. So there's a lot of focus about things that are happening in high tech and so on. We've seen a few crises in the past. And I think that with the founders that I work with, that we invested in, and kind of friends that I help, I think it's very important to understand that it's kind of a wave. And every few years, there's going to be a wave. Like we've seen a wave in 2017, where we've seen another one in 2008 and 2001. And I don't know if unfortunately or luckily I'm old enough to remember and have been in the industry through all those crises. And, back then it seems like the skies are getting cloudy and everything, the sky's going to fall on you. Mm-hmm. But then if you keep pushing and you keep believing in what you're building, and obviously you need to adjust and do the right things, but the sun will shine tomorrow. And if you're doing the right things, if you're building a real business that is solving a real problem, then you have a future. And so I think it's very important to small business owners, especially where you don't have kind of much to lean on, and the founders, entrepreneurs, it's important to understand that if you're solving a real problem, if you're selling a real product or a service that people need, and it's digital and it's online, so people will in most cases will still need it. I'm seeing that with companies that we invested in. If you're solving a real problem, there is a recession, and obviously everyone's talking about what's going to happen next year and so on. So I think that the world will not come to an end at the beginning of next year or during next year. Definitely not because of the recession, okay? So I think that technology will still be here, and companies and enterprises will still be here, and people will still be here, and the demand is real. So the population is growing, older people, that segment is growing. Enterprises are becoming larger and larger. They need more solutions. Online as a whole is growing. So yeah, it's growing. So I think we should be optimistic as well as realistic, right? So that's why it's important. The world is being created, and not created, but being kind of defined, and the future is being defined by founders who build things. And so I think it's important to keep building.
Awesome. Great. This is an important message, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts about this. You mentioned the word real problem and real solution quite often. And do you have any parameters that you're looking for, or do you consider making a solution or a problem more real than not real? Because I'm assuming, maybe my assumption is incorrect, but every founder starts a business assuming that his solution is real, quote unquote. But some solutions are not as good. So what are the parameters in which you judge? And I know it's a vague question, might be a bit challenging, but how do you assess if a solution is real or if a problem is real?
I think it's more easy than you would expect, or it's more simple in a way. Obviously, as you can imagine, I see a lot of companies and entrepreneurs like in the hundreds a year. You would be surprised how often people come with an idea. Too many people have an idea for a startup, right? You sit with a few friends, you drink something, you chat, and someone says, hey, I have this great idea for a startup. Oftentimes, they will talk about a solution. And many times, not sure if many times, but especially in early stage, like pre-seed, where ideation happens, founders will have a solution. Like, I wish there was something that would do this and that. Okay, this sounds like a solution to something. And then oftentimes I will hear a pitch about people telling me about a solution or a technology. right? We can do it. Let's find a technology, or let's build a technology that can identify this and that and do this and that. And so this is like the second stage. I will always ask, okay, what is the problem that you're solving, and how big and painful is the problem? So in order to build a real valuable business, I think that you will have to find a problem, like to start with the problem. That would always be my first question. What is the problem? Please describe the problem. Surprisingly, many people will not know to describe the problem that they're solving. And so the first thing and most important thing, I think, would be to describe the problem, and then who has it. And then the answer should be something like, people between the age of 60 to 80, they have this and that problem. And so I'm going to do this and that in order to solve this. Or enterprises in the US that are doing this and that have the problem because this and that solutions are not solving this. Okay, so it should always start with the problem. And then you would look at how big is the problem, like how many potential customers you have and how much money is there in that if you solve this problem, but also how painful is the problem. The world of solutions is divided into 3 different groups. Like you could be an antibiotics, you could be a painkiller, or you could be a vitamin. And you always want to build something that is antibiotics. So just imagine if you're in a good shape, you're healthy and all that, and just assume that you're the business, you're healthy and everything's well, and someone comes and will offer you vitamins, you will say, yeah, everything's well, let's try this as well. It feels like a nice to have, but why not? But the minute something starts changing in the economy, the first thing that you will cut is the vitamins. But the last thing that you will cut is something that is antibiotics. This is something that you cannot cut. You could potentially die if you don't take your antibiotic. So you should, when looking at the problem and the solution, you should look at the problem. Whoever has it looks at it as like something that is deadly, right? If I have this problem, I need to actively look for a solution, or else I might die. Okay, not necessarily like a person, but think as a business. I have this problem. We're talking about e-commerce, for example. Okay, I have this problem. I have this e-commerce business, and my paid marketing is, I'm not ROI positive. So, I'm bleeding.
Yeah.
Right? Each and every day I spend $1 and I get back 90 cents. This is deadly, right? If I will continue in that way, I will die as a business. So I will actively look for a solution for my conversion, for optimization, for better marketing, better targeting, better whatever. So that's in marketing. The same goes for operations. The same goes for returns. The same goes for every aspect of my business. And so if I'm as an entrepreneur, I found a problem that all e-commerce, for example, have, and the current solution does not take into consideration something. For example, they don't solve it well. There's been something that has been changed in the world that has created the new opportunity, then all the old solutions are still not finding it. So that could be like a problem in the right vertical that I understand and know. Big enough, something that I know how to solve, that's the right timing for this. So I think this is the basics of, in my opinion, how to start a startup. It should start with the problem.
Great. I appreciate the framework. It's amazing. I never thought about this like this, and it's very helpful, especially making the distinction between an antibiotics and actually a painkiller, because painkillers are great. They feel good, but they don't solve the problem from the core. They just reduce the symptoms.
In the example of an e-commerce, like if you're in a situation, for example, when you spend $1 and get 90 cents at the end of the funnel, you're bleeding, right? You need antibiotics. If, for example, your conversion rate is nice, you break even, and you would like to improve your conversion rate, I would say this is kind of a painkiller, right? You can find a solution next quarter for that. Right? It's kind of a high priority, but we should do that along with a few other things, like optimizing our operations, for example, reducing shipping costs. and the rest is kind of nice to have, right? I think it's important to, if you're building something, if you're seeing something, try to characterize it into one of those baskets.
Awesome, great. Did you come up with this framework on your own, or is it something that you heard somewhere else? I'm just curious.
I wouldn't take the credit. I don't know where I've heard that, probably many years ago. I think that most people, when they relate to identifying what are you building, they will divide the world into two groups, right? Either it's a solution for a real problem, or it's a nice to have. I think that oftentimes you'll see a solution that falls somewhere in the middle. Like, it's not a must-have, but if you look, like, you hear the story of the problem and the solution, then you can kind of try to kind of complete the picture for yourself. Like, for example, someone will show you or will build something that is a painkiller, and it will say the trend is going in the direction that this will turn from a painkiller into antibiotics. Okay, and so you might think that it might be the right timing to look at that specific problem or solution or vertical industry and so on and so forth. So I think it makes more sense to split it into three than split the world into black and white.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I think nothing is binary. Everything is like a continuum. And so it's a great framework to view things. But I just want to dig a bit deeper into the concept of frameworks. Do you invest time in coming up with frameworks? Do you find it useful coming up with your own frameworks? I will tell you why I'm asking, because I had like 5 or 6 years ago, I was journaling like crazy. And I thought that every important person, every person that left a note on this world came up with many definitions and frameworks and made it a point to convey it to the world. So I kind of had a practice of trying to invent words or invent frameworks. I didn't continue with this, but I'm just sharing to tell you what I did. And I'm wondering if you, as an investor and as a professional and trying to improve yourself, do you dedicate time into coming up with frameworks, or is it something that comes on the fly, or you don't even consider frameworks that useful?
I think that frameworks are super, super important. Just look at me as an example. Okay, I'm an investor, and many people approach me and they want me to invest in their company. And so in order for me to focus and not waste the other side's time, but also my time, I need some sort of a framework. The framework, it would be some sort of a filter, right? What would make sense for me just based on my personal or my fund's preferences. And so I think it's very important to have a framework because it allows you to move faster. However, this could turn up as something very problematic, right? If you have a framework, I'm not sure if more often than not, but many times you'll find the opportunities somewhere in the edges of your framework or outside of the framework, like things that would not ideally fall into your basket if you build some sort of a proper filter that is based on your framework or guidelines. For example, we at Menara Ventures, we define for ourselves that in order to make sure that we invest in real businesses that has a real solution for a real problem, we want to invest at businesses that have a real product, like a working product, real customers that we can speak to, and paying customers, right? People that got the product for free, but paying customers. And so we also want to see like a minimum revenue per month. And so it's very easy when I see a startup that go into that funnel and the filter will allow that company to get into my basket. And then, this definitely falls into my area of where I'm interested in. And then I will look at it with more, it's more easy for me to dig into it initially. But I will not automatically say no to any other startup, right? I get many emails, as you could probably imagine. I will open every email, and also I would personally respond to every email that I get. So I will look at any opportunity, because sometimes, like I'd say it's like 80-20, like any other thing. You need to spend your time, like 80% of your time in something that this is like kind of your main business, like your core activity, but also not neglect the other 20%, because there might be diamonds somewhere hiding that, no one sees and you accidentally saw. right? They approached you. Sometimes you see like a raw diamond. For example, the founders don't know how to pitch. They don't know how to tell the story. And so other people that will see, like me, many presentations a day, if it will not make sense immediately, like within the first few slides, they will end the presentation and either respond or not, but they will say, this is not for us. And sometimes, and I'm not saying that I'm the only investor that does that. Obviously, the good investors, not that I'm considering myself or naming myself as a good investor, but I think that the good investors or successful investors will spend the effort to look for the rough diamonds, because sometimes the biggest opportunity lies there, because you see something that other people don't do. In fact, when investing in our ventures, but also in my the previous fund that I managed in Tango Ventures, we invested in companies in technology, in e-commerce, D2C businesses, and I would say the largest VCs or the most successful investor would not necessarily invest in, right? So we understand that online digital marketing, e-commerce, we understand that very, very well. I think that we understand it better than anyone else, the vast majority of the investors, and it gives us an edge. And so we could potentially see something that others will not see just because this is our core expertise. And I would say that applies for any other investor that invests in the space that I understand. If I look at a healthcare startup or medical device, I don't understand anything in medical device. And if I see just such a startup, I will not necessarily understand whether this is an opportunity or not. Going back to your original question about frameworks, I think it's very important because it helps you understand what it is that you're trying to achieve and how, but also don't commit too much to that framework. So I think that's will block you from finding the opportunities.
Yeah, awesome. I highly agree, and I love how you laid it out, because it's basically a layering of frameworks. On one hand, frameworks are useful and allow us to move faster. But on the other hand, I'm kind of repeating what you said, but I find it very valuable. Don't commit to your frameworks, because at the edges of your categorization or at the edges of your probing or inspection, you might find the most interesting things. This kind of connects me to a framework that I like, of learning from the extremes and taking the principles from the extremes to the middle. So for example, I'm into fitness. So if I want to learn about dieting, I see what the bodybuilders are doing and what the fight people are doing, and I'm trying to do something that fits my needs. So eating a lot of protein and avoiding a lot of shitty food, for example. So learning from the extremes and putting this in the middle. Very interesting.
I think that if you look at that example, there are some trivial things that you shouldn't do, right? But we'll still do that. Most people would eat junk food, though we understand it's not healthy. But I think the way I look at things, you shouldn't be too radical about something, right? In essence, being too radical about something, too religious about something is like a potential for blind spots, right? Because it makes you once again, going back to the previous topic that we discussed about, it's a framework that will prevent you from looking at different directions because it's outside of your framework. So for example, if I want to run a marathon, I will not eat a hamburger, but maybe I'm going to be less happy, right? So maybe it makes sense to do my thing, but also every now and then try to cut the corner, because it makes it easier sometimes. And that applies for everything, I think. Investments, probably life as a whole. But that's my philosophy.
Yeah, I agree.
I would assume that many people would argue that and would say that the only way to succeed is being super, super focused, not cut corners, not look the other way around. But at the end of the day, it's more about a personality thing.
I agree. And it's also very context dependent. I have also two frameworks that I use, basically two quotes that I remember very often, as they are contradictory, but they are relevant to our conversation. So first of all is, I don't remember who quoted them, but everything in moderation, including moderation. So this is one thing. And the other one is, the good system you follow is better than the perfect system you can't follow. So this is also something very powerful with regards to dieting or running like crazy, because people go to the gym and they go 6 times a week, which isn't sustainable. So they either injure themselves or they just stop going, and then it's not worth their time. So everything in moderation in a way, and also sticking to something that you can follow and is consistent.
For sure. And I think that oftentimes the excellent is the enemy of good and success as a whole, right? You want to perfect something, like Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. Among other things. He has this quote that I don't remember properly how it goes, but in essence, it says, if you're launching your product and you're not embarrassed by it, you're launching too late.
It's too late, yeah.
And so what it actually means is that the most important thing is to move forward, not necessarily to make it perfect, but you need to move forward. Like you need to make decisions, you need to push forward and not stall. If you're stalling, in fact, you're going backwards. And sometimes, even as a business, if you're not making a progress in any direction, you're just stalling, just standing in one place, you are going backwards because your competitors are going forward all the time. The industry, the market is going forward. And so, or not necessarily forward, they're moving. If you're not moving, you might fall behind. You on the contrary, you might also win, right? Everyone will do many mistakes and you will win. But I think the chances will be that if you make decisions, some decisions will be the right decisions, and you will move your business in a direction that will fit you, your expectations, your aspirations, what would you like to achieve for the business and for yourself. And so I think it makes sense to do something, like build a plan that's 80-90% fine, not necessarily wait for the 100%. I remember back the days where I worked at we built this project. I was a product manager for a product that SAP built together with another big company. It was like a few hundred people working on that project and product. It was a global project, and we had people from the US, from France, from India, and Germany, Israel, and SAP is obviously a German company. And I used to work side by side with a German software architect. And he was 15, 20 years older than me, and a German architect. And my philosophy is like, let's build like an 80% plan, 90% plan, and let the engineers fill in the gaps. And he was outrageous about this. He said, how can you build a plan that's not 100% accurate? How can you leave a room for people to invent? So I said, it's completely the opposite. Like, we hire the best engineers and the best people to work at this team. You need to let them express themselves. And sometimes you're not the smartest person in the room. You need to surround yourself with people that you think that are smarter than you. And you need to leave them some room for invention, for development, for innovation. And so I think oftentimes where you build something that in product management, it says, you build something in the lab under the fluorescents, under the lamps, and every plan will change, right? There's the quote, I think it's Muhammad Ali, every plan gets changed after you get punched in the face, right? So you need to build a plan, but remember that it's the base for changes. You need to have something, but you need to go out quickly and test. This is also why we invest in founders that went quickly with a spend. Sometimes it's kind of a solution that the technology is kind of taped with glues and with duct tape. It's not scalable in any way, but customers want it and they're paying for it. And now you can start changing and adapt yourself to real needs and not only to things that you have kind of in the back of your mind. So I think it's very, very important, to move, to start to make decisions. And obviously you need to understand that not all your decisions will be right? There's no one successful person that has made 100% of his decisions right. But I think that successful people move forward in a direction that at the point where they made the decision seemed right for them.
This is very interesting. And you kind of transitioned to the next thing that I wanted to ask you. We talked about this before. Unfortunately or unfortunately, I wasn't around, quote unquote, in the prior crisis because I wasn't into business back then in 2017 and to 2008. So I'm curious to hear if the sentiment back then felt the same. This is the first question, and I apologize for asking two questions combined, but you just take it wherever you want. And the second question is, if you can recall, based on your own experience as a founder, hard decisions that you took while everybody said, don't go that route or don't do this way, and you decided to go in a specific direction, and what were the frameworks that you used, and what eventually happened doing so?
So I think that going back to each and every crisis, I think has its own kind of thing, reasoning for it's very easy to look backward and then say, yeah, this is why this happened and this is why that happens. It's very difficult to do it while you're in the crisis. But I think that going back to those years, I think that every crisis had different reasoning behind it. I think that this time it's different. By the way, I think that all of them felt the same. While you're in the mid of the crisis, it feels like it's the end of the world. We're not sure what's going to happen to the economy and all that. But eventually, the economy grows and will continue to grow. And as I said at the beginning, businesses will still be here and people will still be here, and they will need food and they will need to drink, and businesses will need to succeed. And so I think that what's so different about this crisis versus the other ones is that, if you look at the public markets, and, everyone has seen what happened to the public technology companies with their share prices going down. These are real businesses. Most of them are solving real problems and are serving real customers that are paying real money. It's different than for example, the dot-com bubble. Like every person would buy a domain and would try to do something, and it had no, the basics of business, like no real problem. It's not a real solution. There's no real customer that will pay for this solution or product. Nowadays, it's completely different. Like those companies, those unicorns, like the vast majority of the unicorns, that their share prices has been cut, but also the larger companies. These are real companies that are selling sometimes tens or hundreds of millions of dollars a year. They might be losing money, and so this is why investors will change the way they look at them this year, where, in 2022, everything is about profitability and efficiency, and last year it was about growth. These trends change, but these are real companies. In most cases, the unicorns are real businesses. You will look at e-commerce, for example. There's been a spike in e-commerce in the corona, and then back then I remember that everyone says, yeah, retail is dead, no one is going to go to malls again, and everyone's going to order everything online. And so I think that many people thought that, yeah, it's a great boost for online purchase. My friend's parents, back in the corona, they wanted to buy a car online. Parents, like in the 70s, they're in the 70s. And I said, wow, this is amazing. I mean, willing to do like a huge transaction online and buying a new car online. It's because they know what they want, and they've seen this car around on the street, and they know that this is what they can commit on buying. And so I thought that this is great. So what happened, I think, is that the technology is pushing us in different directions. I think we understand, like online is a strong trend, AI, machine learning is a strong trend. Generally speaking, digital transformation is a strong trend, right? All businesses will acquire new technology because they need to compete. And if you don't, use technology, you will not be able to compete. Once again, I will go to the fundamentals. If there is a problem in a real product and there are real customers, and the reality is that there are real customers now that want to buy your technology. So the demand is still here, right? So the basics of economy, supply and demand. Demand is still here, even though there is crisis. Obviously, in some areas, you'll see that there is less demand, right? And if you own an e-commerce business, you're most likely, but not necessarily e-commerce, right? Most of the businesses will feel some sort of a slowdown in demand. So demand will slow and is slowing or has slowed, but it will not disappear, right? People will continue to buy clothes, food. They will continue to buy food. and businesses will continue to manufacture, to build, to sell products. So demand is still here and it will remain. I think this is so different than any other crisis that we had in the past. And so this is also why I'm very optimistic, right? But also I'm trying to be realistic, right? The businesses I'm involved in, I'll say, yeah, this might take time. And so you need to prepare and build a plan of how you will survive. Some of the businesses will not survive the slow demand, like the new slower demand. Some businesses will not survive, especially if the fundamentals are not right. Like you're spending $1 on paid marketing and you're getting back 90 cents. That will not last unless you have a plan of how you survive like the next 2 years, or I don't know how long it will take, but you need to build something to survive. But many businesses will survive. And if we look at the history of previous crises, the greatest companies has grown out of a crisis, right? What we're seeing right now, like the largest companies like Uber and Fiverr and Wix also. Wix, for example, was founded in 2006, right? But it received a tremendous push with the gig economy at that time, where crisis led to many people losing their jobs and they started to become freelancers. So every crisis has an opportunity alongside with it. And so you need to do two things. One is survive, right? Some businesses will not survive. You need to build like a plan of how you survive, but you also need to actively look for those opportunities, because there are opportunities right now in your business, in your vertical. If you're in e-commerce, if you're a startup, there are opportunities that you need to actively look for. And if you'll do it right, then you will come out strong out of these crises. And some businesses will, it's also an opportunity, right? Your competitors might not survive, right? And their customers will come to you. And so there are opportunities. You need to plan and build something. Of course, leave some room for luck. I would say that more than 50% of success is luck. Some would say 95% is luck. And if I could ask for luck versus brains, I would ask for like, give me 100% luck, right? Because it's a guarantee for success. But I would say that you need to plan, at least the way I look at it. You need to plan, you need to actively look for something. And obviously success is where luck finds like someone who has prepared something, and then there's an opportunity. Like everyone finds a luck every now and then, but you need to be able to, seize the opportunity and do something with it. So you need to plan.
Awesome. My uncle always told me, once in a lifetime opportunity comes every other week.
I think it makes sense. There are many people who say that I'm not like this joke that obviously I think that I'm not like a good comedian, but the person who dies and goes to heaven and he asks God, like, all my life I was so miserable. Why didn't you let me win the lottery at least once? And he says, but you never filled and submitted the form. You need to do something, right?
Awesome. I want to be respectful of your time. I enjoyed this conversation a lot. I have so many other questions regarding what we discussed, and we can take it to so many directions, but our time is running out. So I would like to ask you if there's anything else that you would like to speak about, discuss, mention, final words, anything to conclude the conversation?
I think that if you're a founder, or you're considering to become a founder, and there's never a better time than today to start your business, to do the thing that you're passionate about and pursue your dreams. Successful people do the things that they love, and this will eventually lead to success. And there's this famous quote that I really love and like, and it's called "The Man in the Arena" by Theodore Roosevelt. And I urge every one of the listeners to go and read the quote, and I will not read it here, but in essence, what it says is that the most important thing is to get into the arena. The arena refers to, like, I think the boxing arena, where two boxers get into the arena and fight. And one will win and the other one will lose, but both of them will get the glory of the fighting. Glory and the honor will not go to the critics who sit around the arena and talk about those two boxers, and the one especially providing some criticism on the one who lost. So generally speaking, I think you need to be active, you need to do something, And more often than not, doing something will result in success, and not doing anything will result in just not doing anything. So I think especially now, there might be many opportunities in your area, in your vertical, in your industry, in the things that you know and love, and go look for them and, build a business, build a plan that will grow you and will take you to the next phase, because there are so many opportunities right now out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eran. It was a pleasure discussing with you, sharing ideas and learning from you. Where can people connect, follow you, see more about what you're doing?
So I can be reached on LinkedIn, quite active and responsive there. I think that's kind of the main channel. But also I can be reached via email. So that's eran.savir@gmail.com or eran@menaraventures.com. And very responsive to emails. So I think that probably are the main channels. You could go visit our website at menaraventures.com, get more information.
Awesome, great. We obviously will share the links in the show notes. That's it. Thanks again. Have a lovely rest of your day. And take care.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's great to connect, and thank you. Have a great next year.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hi guys, this is Yaron again. Just a few more things before you take off. Number one, if you want to learn more about e-commerce and marketing, make sure you check out our YouTube channel, which is called EcomXFactor Official. Number two, check out our Facebook group, which is called EcomXFactor Marketing and E-commerce Mastermind. This is a great place to ask questions and connect with other business owners. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share it with your friends and colleagues. Plus, leave a review at your favorite podcast app.